Well, good evening to each and all of you. It's a pleasure to be here in Lafayette, and thank you for taking some time this evening to learn about a new organization and its mission. But before I begin, I'd like to at least say a special thanks to Dan from the church here, as well as Lori, and I see Pete that was at a dinner and the Convergence meeting in May in Connecticut. I understand there are other people here from the Lafayette Church, as well as some students and staff from the Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary. I actually took a course there in Spanish in 1983. I graduated from the GTU with a MA degree. And there's maybe some other people, but I also want to do some recognizing, if you don't mind. In front of me here are Dick and Allison Gist from Sacramento. They might win the long distance award. No, wait a minute. Maria and I came further than you did. We live in Washington, D.C. Both are investors. Dick was on our board of directors here in the United States, representing a group in Sacramento, the Presbyterian Church, and thanks so much for coming. It's great to see you. Stuart Kringle, who's over here on the right with his wife Jennifer, whom I just met this evening. We came over together. Stuart is a new staff person for Oiko Credit in the Northern California Bay Area, so I'm hoping you'll get a chance to talk with him and meet with him. He helped bring some of the people here tonight, so Stuart, it's good to see you. And then finally, my dearest wife over here, Maria. It's her birthday this weekend, so I'm trying to... we can all sing happy birthday to her. So I got her a massage and I took her to a play last night, so I think she's feeling pretty good, but she doesn't want to tell you how old she is, and so don't ask her. So listen, it's great to be here, and we're delighted to be in your company this evening. I have a hunch that probably many of you have heard of the word microcredit, so let's just see how many of you heard of the word microcredit. So this is a smart audience, so this doesn't have to be microcredit 101. There are even some surveys in the last year or so that show that 1 out of 10 adults in the United States, that's 10%, which is a pretty high percentage, actually have some awareness of the word microcredit. So your percentage is much higher than the national average, and the reason why we probably have some understanding of that term is because in December 2006, Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh was given the Nobel Peace Prize for establishing the Grameen Village Bank in Bangladesh in the 1970s, early 1980s. He was thought that someday he would get it in economics and wondered why he didn't, but because he got it for the Nobel Peace Prize, and there is a real correlation between economic justice and the reduction of violence, that Peace Award from Nobel catapulted microfinance, microcredit into a higher level of awareness. And so we benefit from all the pioneering work that Muhammad Yunus did for the Grameen Bank. Grameen is Bengali for village, one of the first prototypical microcredit organizations in the world. And if I were to ask you if you've heard any microcredit funds, I have a feeling some of you know of the word Kiva. How many of you heard of the word Kiva? So I'm glad there's not that many of you who have heard of the word Kiva, because they're a competitor of ours, and though I like that organization quite a bit, it happens to be one that people know a lot because it's on a digital presence. It came in through the website and therefore has a lot of attraction, especially among young people. It's not so much an investment opportunity as it is a donation, but Kiva is a very, very good and strong organization. I could tell you more about Kiva. They approached us for a partnership and we weren't able to join with them. So I'm glad you know about microfinance, and I'm hoping you're going to want to know more about Oiko Credit tonight. And I invite you to consider what you do learn here this evening for your own personal participation, that which you could share with relatives, friends, and families, members of your churches, institutions, churches, congregations, theological schools, and others, because I'm not going to ask you to make a donation to Oiko Credit. I will invite you to make an investment in Oiko Credit, which means we would ask that you loan us your money. We borrow money from you. We give you interest on that every year that you have it with us, and then when you want it back, we will give it back to you. Because since 1975, when we were formed, Every year for 36 consecutive years, we have received investments from individuals and institutions. We pay them a dividend or interest on that, and we've given all that money back to those investors without failure. Nobody has lost even a penny. As you will see, poor people empowered with credit are very reliable borrowers. And right now around the world we have 43,000 investors that make it possible for us to make loans to almost 30 million people. But let's back up before we talk about investing to look at what we mean by microfinance. A lot is going on within microcredit these days, partly because commercial interests like major banks are entering this market, and that's beginning to create something that we call mission drift. So when anybody talks to you about microcredit or microfinance, please be informed enough to ask them questions about what they do with their money, to whom do they loan, and who benefits from it, because that will tell you whether it is helping poor people to take a few steps up the ladder out of economic injustice and misery. So though she's not in the room, I'm going to invite you to meet one of our borrowers. Her name is Corazon Endonela. 4 years ago, when I met Corazon Endonela, her children ranged from the years 2, 4, 7, and 9. She and her very ill husband lived in a small shack on the outskirts of Manila, on the island of Luzon in the country of the Philippines. And there wasn't much work there, and even if there had been some work for either one of them, her husband would not be able to be employed because of her illness. So she had no job, her husband was ill, and they had 4 kids. How did they survive? The way they survived was Corazon would find a way to take her 4 kids into downtown Manila, which would take a little while. She would go into the prosperous section of Manila, which is known as Makati. She would fan out her 4 kids, including the 2-year-old, and all 5 of them, the 4 kids and Corazon, would take strategic corners in this prosperous section of Manila. And from 7 or 8 in the morning to about 7 or 8 at night, they would beg. They would ask for money from passersby because they were in the more well-to-do section. Maybe somebody would give them some money. Or maybe somebody would give them some food, maybe somebody would give them a comb. And with whatever they had at the end of that 12-hour long day, they would find their way back home, and with the money or the food or what they were given and sell, they would buy food for their 1 meal per day. That's how Corazon and her 5 other people in her family survived on $2 or less a day by begging in the streets of Manila. Now, Corazon sometimes had to stay home with her ill husband because he was so sick, and the 4 kids on their own would go into downtown Manila and do the very same thing. Nobody in this room would trade places with that family. One day, she began to realize that a woman friend of hers was doing a little bit, if not more, a lot better than she was. And so Corazon Endonela, who does not read, does not write, has never been to school, has no assets, has no collateral, goes up to this woman and says, wait a minute, I noticed that, you're eating better, your children seem like they're going to school. How did this happen? And a lot of it happens by word of mouth. And this woman friend said to Corazon, if you go over to that little shack over there, this little small storefront, it's an Oiko credit microfinance institution, you might be able to improve the conditions for your family. Corazon is intimidated by that invitation and challenge. Like I said, she doesn't read, she doesn't write, she doesn't know what goes on in there, and she has no idea of what's going to happen. But she's desperate and poor and wants something for her family that she hasn't had. She goes into that 3-person microfinance institution and conducts the largest financial transaction in her life. And with her thumb, she presses on an ink pad and sticks that on a piece of paper, and that is her verbal, written agreement that she will pay this money back. $35, the largest amount of money that she's ever had. Now, I bet you everybody in this room has $35 on them right now, except for these students over here. Oh, they're over there too. We take $35 for granted. And if you don't have it in your pocket right now, there's an ATM not too far away from here where you can get it. unless there's one already in the church. Is there an ATM in the church?
No, but that's a good idea.
Yeah, there you go. Good idea, because you will eventually have one. The first ATM I saw in a church was in Trinity United Church of Christ, which is Jeremiah Wright's and Obama's congregation in Chicago, Illinois. I worked 17 years for the United Church of Christ. You go into this huge cavernous lobby, and over on the right is this red marquee, like neon lights saying, you know, get your cash here, because if you're going to donate money to church on Sunday morning and you don't have it, there's a way to get it. I bet it's going to be like this in the future. You're going to sit down in the pew and there's going to be a credit card machine right in front of you, and you're just going to slide your card right there. Money is important. $35. And with $35, like a lot of poor people, she's hardworking, creative, industrious. She just needs to be given a chance. Somebody has to believe in her. She can't get a commercial loan because she has no assets nor collateral. She doesn't qualify. The only way she can get credit is by paying 1,000% interest to a loan shark, a predator on the streets of Manila. With $35, she buys a used sewing machine and some materials. She finds a way to power that sewing machine, and because she's industrious and creative, she makes slippers and clothes. She is actually doing a craft, a skill. And now, instead of going into downtown Makati and fanning out her kids into 4 different directions, she throws down a sheet. She puts the slippers and the clothes on that sheet. They're good, they're attractive, and the people who come by see them and buy it. She has income. This is a job for a poor woman who has never had a job before, who was never given the possibility because nobody made a loan to her. Nobody believed that she could work that loan. Now her family can buy 2 meals a day instead of 1. Her ill husband can go to a doctor once every 2 years instead of never. She has to buy the clothes and their books for her kids to go to public school, something that has been imposed by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. She feels much better about herself. That leaky roof will be replaced eventually. The dirt floor will actually have wood pretty soon, and she's paying off her loan. That is the power of microcredit in a snapshot. Small loans to poor people for income-generating purposes. Now, what would you do if you were Corazon and Donela? Because you're all smart business people, even better educated, you would do exactly what Corazon and Donela did, and that is what? You would take out another loan. Because she's made the first one work, and she wants to make it grow and work even more. And because she's paying off that first loan, the terms of her second loan are even better, and this time she borrows $100. And Oiko Credit gives that to her because she has made the first one successful and is paying it off. With $100, she buys 3 sewing machines. She employs 2 of her sisters and a woman friend. Now 4 women have jobs and income who did not have them before. The power of microcredit to enable poor people to come up out of the injustice of economic misery. That's why Muhammad Yunus was given the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. Now the good news is there are about 210 million people out there like Corazon and Donela who are getting loans from approximately $85 billion that are currently in the microfinance pipeline. $85 billion from a variety of sources are making it possible for 210 million people like Corazon to get loans around the world. That is the good news. What happened on this past Monday, October 31st? How many people are on the planet right now as of October 31st, 2011?
7 billion.
7 billion, very good. The United Nations expected probably somewhere in India on Monday, October 31st, was the 7th billionth person on the planet. It's a lot of people, and that rate is going to keep going faster and faster. Within 12 years, it'll be 8. So, 7 billion people on the planet right now, 3.4 billion, that is half of the total global population, live on $2 or less a day. Unbelievable. 1 out of every 2 people on this planet right now live in the poverty of $2 or less a day, and 1.1 billion suffer with $1.25, the poorest of the poor. Half of all God's people. I don't know how they do it. Nobody should have to do it. And that's why microfinance is so important. We need approximately $400 billion, not $85 billion. We need approximately $400 billion just to be able to make small loans between $25 and $300 to people like Corazon right now. And I'm hoping to get about half of it in this room tonight.
What are we saying?
So that's the challenge. It's a mutual rewarding process whereby you, like institutions and people in the North, who have resources to share, not to donate, not to give, not to contribute, but to loan to us. We will take your investment, small, medium, large. We will recycle it as credit around the world for as long as you let us have it, and then we will return it to you. It is a very, very, very smart way to help reduce poverty and enable people like Corazon and millions of others to take a few steps out of the conditions that they're in. And I hope you will accept that invitation and consider this church, your seminary, you as individuals to participate. Let me just give you a little bit of history about Oiko credit, because it has a very strong religious root to it, which is probably why we're meeting in a Lutheran church on a Saturday evening. And I'm so grateful that you're here. Oiko credit was established by the World Council of Churches. And this denomination, the Lutheran, as well as mainline Protestant, Presbyterian churches, the United Church of Christ Disciples, Methodist, Baptist, Episcopal, all the major denominations in the United States are affiliated with the World Council of Churches, which is based in Geneva, Switzerland. And every 7 years it has what it's called its General Assembly. And the founding moment for the organization that you're learning about tonight was in 1968 at the General Assembly of the World Council of Churches in Uppsala, Sweden. The World Council of Churches, which then had about 245 denominations as members, today has about 370 national denominations as members. It's grown, still in Geneva. It's a very prophetic, very justice-minded, very forward-looking organization, mostly because a lot of its participation comes from the global south. Churches and Christians who live in poverty and justice in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa and Asia, Middle East, the Pacific Islands. So there's a strong social justice impulse in this organization. And the issues that were being highlighted in 1968 so happened to have been apartheid in South Africa and the US war in Vietnam, soon to expand to Laos and Cambodia. I do not presume that you would agree now or then, you don't need to, on the social issues or the justice or the wrongness or the right or the left of those issues in 1968. You may have thought differently about them. You may think about them differently now. All I'm sharing is for those Christians at that meeting in Uppsala, Sweden, there were 3,000 people there. They had demonstrated, they had written letters, they had petitioned, they had educated, they had done a lot of things to protest what they considered to be social evils, apartheid in South Africa, the US war in Vietnam, and they realized that their investments still made them complicit in that social role. That by investing in IBM, that's making identity cards and apartheid, they were still helping IBM and apartheid to succeed. By buying stock in Honeywell, which is making anti-personnel weapons, Dow Chemical, which is making napalm, Kellogg Brown and Root, which is still a subsidiary of Halliburton in Texas, built tiger cages the size of a coffin, forcing 2 or 3 people in, just because of these financial transactions, also in Bank of America, Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, Barclays. All that financial participation meant that they were helping the conduction, the movement forward of apartheid and the war in Vietnam to continue. And they said, enough. We do not want our investments to make those social evils possible. This gave rise to a whole new enlightened understanding of divestment, which heretofore with the Quakers in about 1855 meant that you did not invest in pornography, gambling, tobacco, alcohol. You avoided those. Now you're adding corporations and banks. 3 years later, the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility was founded in 1971. And so now you have what is called green investing. If you come forward, you put the money where you think it is doing well, and you avoid the places that you do not want your financial resources to make things happen that you'd consider morally unjust. But it was the second part of the discussion that brings us here this evening. Churches said, and this was pretty radical, and I don't use that word frequently because it's not earned in my opinion. They said, wait a minute, why are we exporting our money into that stock or that bank? Why don't we create our own financial institution? Why don't we loan money to ourselves and use the money for the purposes that we think are important? Martin Luther King Jr. was invited to that meeting in February 1968. He did not attend because of a death threat. He was murdered 2 months later in April in Memphis, Tennessee. But he sent a communication to that event in Uppsala, Sweden, that bridged the gap between concerns about apartheid in South Africa and the war in Vietnam and poverty alleviation. And so churches got together to establish a financial institution. Churches, progressive Christians, got together to establish a bank. Now, I don't pretend to know how everybody feels about banks. My father was a banker. And I used to, jeer him because I thought banking was sort of like the work of the devil. And so mostly I think progressive Christians and church people think that that's kind of hands off over there. If you gain interest because of the loans you make, that's the work of the devil. I mean, look at the Hebrew Scriptures. Look at the New Testament. All that prohibition about making money off poor people or making money off loans. And to think that here and now, like positive, progressive, social-minded, economic development-minded people thinking about creating a financial institution, that was a real stretch. Moving the ethos and the vocabulary from donations and gifts and charity, which is where most religious organizations find themselves very comfortable, to the language of loans and business and credit and responsibility and accountability, that was a big, big change. But it worked. And in 1975, after it was established at the second assembly of the WCC, Oiko Credit, which is legally chartered as the Ecumenical Development Cooperative Society, ecumenical because it involves lots of religious organizations, development because its purpose is to help people out of poverty, cooperative society, everybody is valued the same in terms of their money and their voice, society, that's the legally named organization for Oiko Credit, and if there's time, I'll explain why it changed its name to Oiko Credit. Oiko Credit then, the Ecumenical Development Cooperative Society in 1975 began to receive investments from churches, especially Germany and the United States, and in 1976 it had $2 million. And with $2 million in 1976, it thought it could loan out $1 million and cover that $1 million. It made its first loan to a group in Mexico, its second loan to a group in Ecuador, its third loan to a small group of farmers in India. So in Ecuador, 12, I say this word respectfully, peasants. They had never used money before in their life. They are uneducated men. They were all men. 12 farmers borrowed money from Oiko Credit to rent land, to buy coffee seed, to plant coffee, to harvest coffee, and to bring it to market. That is now a fair trade coffee cooperative that employs 47 people. The second loan that year, the third was in Mexico, was in India for a tea cooperative. 6 Indians borrowed money for the exact same purpose. In 1976, this organization had $2 million. It made loans in 3 countries and had project partners out there like that. It is now 2011. We've gone from $2 million to $930 million. We have loans in not 3 countries, but 71 countries. We don't have 3 project partners. We have 900 project partners. 600 of them are microfinance institutions. 300 of them are cooperatives. We make loans to these institutions, which is making it possible for 29.4 million poor people to get credit that they can't get any other way because they're poor. And the only other way, and this is the people that we're trying to shove out of the business, is the loan shark who will make 1,000% interest on a loan that's made to poor people because they don't know enough about credit. Eunice said that it should be a human right. Credit should be a human right even for people who don't have assets and collateral. Gandhi, a Hindu, in the 1940s said, poverty is the worst form of violence. Yunus, when he won the Nobel Prize in December 2006, said, "Poverty is the absence of all human rights," which is why there's a correlation between international security and the reduction of poverty. More economic justice means that fewer people fight each other over resources. More economic justice means there is a proper sharing of resources so that the rich-poor gap is not widening, not only around the world, but even as we know more and more, even here in the United States. Oiko Credit's mission is to help eliminate poverty by making loans to poor people who do not have means to credit, by inviting people and institutions in the North to share their resources, to share their investments with us so that we use that capital to help make it possible for poor people to live better, dignified, and the lives that they should be entitled to live around the world. I'm going to slow down and stop right there, and if you're great tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
So the question of interest rates is probably the number one question on people's minds when it comes to how is microcredit doing what it's supposed to be doing, and who's benefiting and who's not, and so forth. So I'm glad it's a lead-off question for our second part here this evening. So in terms of investing, I'm going to start there and I'm going to walk you through two other places after that. We have a product, an investment product, registered in every state in the United States. This is a legally bound document with the securities officials in California. It's called a Global Community Note. This is its prospectus. Anytime anybody offers you an opportunity to invest, they're required by law to tell you that there's a prospectus either immediately available, which is the best way to do it, or how you can get it very quickly. And if you wanted to see this prospectus, it's a 60-page document, and we update this every year because we put new financials in it every year. And you're welcome to take this home. And this is the investment application form. Now, you might be curious from what you heard from Dan. We offer 2% maximum interest to our investors, whether they invest the minimum amount of $250 or the maximum amount. The largest individual investor in the United States is a woman in Dallas, Texas with $400,000. The largest institutional investor in the United States is Providence Health and Services in Seattle with $3.8 million. The woman in Dallas has it there for 10 years. The Providence Health and Service has it there for 8 years. The minimum is 1 year. So whether you're at $250 for 1 year or $4 million for 8 years, everybody gets 2%. As a cooperative, we value everybody's money equally, institution or individual, no matter how much or how little, no matter how long we have it or how short. Of course, the more money for the longer period means we can make more loans to poor people. But if you have $250, please, that will make 10 loans of $25 to people like Corazon and Donela. There is nothing too little that you can't invest. So even if it's small for 12 months or a lot for several months. But there are some people who do not want to take interest on their investment. The woman in Texas has $400,000 at 0%. She does not want to pay taxes on that interest. And if we give you interest, we give you a form by February 15th of the following year. Is it the 1099? I forget all these numbers that I have. Which we also report to the IRS. I spend so much time with lawyers and forms, I don't even know my own birthday right now. And Maria, you don't need to remind me, if you know what I mean. So we report to you the interest that you get, as well as to the IRS, because that is taxable income. So we offer 0%, 1%, and 2% interest to the investors. Now, 80% of our investors take 2%, which is your full right, and I hope you will. But like I say, there are some people who just want their money back and they want to keep money in the organization. Partly because we're founded by churches, we have a lot of church people who invest in Oiko Credit. And they're more interested in seeing a high social, if not moral, reward from their investment than a financial return. But we know that in order to get investments, we need to offer a financial return. And our investment return is 2%, and it's been that way for 20-some years. Now, 2% is actually pretty competitive if you look what's going on in the market. In fact, if you had had all your money, and others, in Oiko Credit, you would have kept your money and have gotten interest on it because we're not a public stock. We're not connected to what goes on in Wall Street. We're a cooperative society. We make our own decisions about return to you. So you could have kept all your money. So a lot of people said the best investment they made in 2008 and 2009 was in Oiko Credit, and they wish they had made more because they lost so much. So right now, 2%, although 10 years ago that was seen as low because market rate then was 4 or 5, 2% is actually pretty competitive, which is why we're seeing an uptake in investments. It takes you 6 years and 8 months to get 2% from a treasury bond. I don't know where your contingency monies are in certificates or savings account, but we will give you 2% in 12 months, and I don't think there's any bank here in Lafayette or California that will do that. So instead of keeping your money in Bank of America or Wells Fargo or wherever you're keeping it and not getting much interest, you can loan it to us, we'll give you 2%, and you'll get your money back. Listen, anytime somebody talks to you about investment, they cannot say it's risk-free. It is against the law. You can be fined by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Nor is it enough to say that what has happened in the last 36 years with Oiko Credit is going to determine what's going to happen in the next year at Oiko Credit. But for the last 36 years, from 1975 until 2011, every investor has gotten annual interest and all their money back. We've done that consecutively, successfully for 36 years. Chances are that's going to keep happening and happening and happening. But mind you, this is not guaranteed. This is an investment, and wherever there's an investment, there is risk. So we invite you to take as much of interest as you can, up to 2%, and even the money that you have in your savings accounts can do well with Oiko Credit. Now, we do not loan directly to Corazon and Donela. We loan to institutions. We loan to microcredit banks or microfinance institutions. Those are the same. A microfinance institution will have other products like savings and maybe insurance, but they're financial institutions. And we loan to cooperatives, mostly NGO groups that are going to do income-generating projects. Maybe they were advocating on education. Now they're going to do a training school that will charge people tuition. Maybe they were teaching and organizing around health. Now they're going to do a clinic where they're going to charge people for health services. A lot of it is agriculture, farm. 70% of the world's poor are women and children. 65% of the world's poor still live in rural areas, not in metropolitan communities. And because Oiko Credit has offices in 31 countries in the Global South, we're able to reach into rural areas, unlike other organizations, and get loans to poor people, unlike other organizations. And there are a lot of institutions which have loans, and like we do, that once they see Oiko Credit green lights an investment in a rural area, they will piggyback with us because they know we've done a thorough due diligence. So not only when you invest in Oiko Credit, you benefit Oiko Credit and its borrowers, you create a wider trough for more money to come into those institutions because we have eyes and ears on the ground. So we loan to institutions, and those institutions on-lend to the micro borrowers. So there's 3 steps. Your investment, 1, that money goes to our international office in Europe and gets wired to an organization in Asia, Africa, Latin America, step 2. And then that money gets loaned to borrowers in that community, staffed by banks that know the people in that community, step 3. So there are 2 more interest rates. Yours is 2%. There's the interest rate to the institutions that we make loans to, and then there's an interest rate by those institutions to the micro borrower like Corazon. Our interest rates to the institutions, the MFIs, microfinance institutions, and cooperatives, depends on several factors. What's the inflation rate in that country? Is it a first loan or a second loan? Is the loan in hard currency like dollars or euros, or can it be a local currency which is better for the borrower because if there's a devaluation of the currency, they just have to pay back what the original loan was? Is it a project that you think is going to work, or is it experimental? Is it a solid economy like Chile or South Africa, or a vulnerable economy like Haiti and Zimbabwe? All these factors get woven in. A project in Uganda wants to build bicycles. Well, will people in Uganda ride bicycles? Because a lot of people are afraid they're going to get hit by cars when they ride bicycles. So lots of factors. Altogether, that range of the interest rate to the institutions is 7 to 9%, somewhere in there. That is sometimes below market rate, that is often market rate, and sometimes it's a point above market rate. The risk that we take is making loans to poor people who have no assets and collateral. But we sometimes will make it at below market, or above market rate, depending on the conditions of the loan and the country. Now, when it comes to microfinance institutions, that rate will be varied depending on a multiplicity of factors. And we watch interest rates very carefully because that's the most controversial issue right now. And we believe in transparency of interest and fees. Some banks will say their interest rates are low, but they have fees that are hidden and the borrower keeps paying a lot more. We participate in campaigns to make sure that these interest rates are public and that they are kept down. So we often follow what Grameen has done in Bangladesh, and Grameen had 4 interest rates in Bangladesh, and Muhammad Yunus is a friend of our organization. I get to see him, once every couple of years because of our association. If you're the poorest of the poor, it is 0%. Yunus says that to catch a dollar, you need a dollar. You all know that. If you have money, you can make money with it. Poor people don't have that first dollar. And so there are some poor people who do not know how to use money at all, and therefore you have to find other kind of benefits, services. You might give them seed, you might give them a chicken, you might give them a pig, you might give them a donkey, you might give them a sheep or a cow. There are other kinds of stock that you can try and help people with. We do not do that ourselves, but we have a large presence and a referral agency. We know organizations that can do that. But there are even some poor people who can use the first dollar, and if you're really among the poorest of the poor, Grameen says it is 0%. You take the dollar, whatever you make that dollar do is yours, you just pay back the dollar. If it's for a medical purpose, it's 5%. If it's for education, it's 8%. And if it's for income generating purposes, it's high, it is 20%. Now 20% probably sounds pretty high to you. And it sounds high to me too. Though I'm glad to say that the interest rates for income-generating loans has been going down for a variety of reasons, mostly competition and technical efficiency. But what is the interest rate on your credit card? Right. Yeah, and sometimes even more. So you know what it's like to have interest rate at 15 or 20%. The reason why it is relatively high is because it's very labor-intensive. That is why microfinance and microcredit cost a lot. It takes time and energy and therefore people and money to deliver it. So I'll just do this contrast for you. Over here is the traditional banking. Now you probably know a lot about that traditional banking, and if you don't like what traditional banking has been doing to us in 2008, you better start drinking some other kind of coffee, because that's what Occupy Sacramento and Occupy San Francisco and Occupy Detroit is all about. The rich-poor gap and how the banks who created this crisis that Greece is in, Maria's from Greece, that the New York City banks and their entourage and Goldman Sachs and you name it, created this crisis based on their traditional banking model. This is what microfinance does not do. We do not make loans to people that we don't know. We don't push more loans on people when we know they can't pay them back. These were bad loans made at the expense of all of us so that rich banks can get richer and richer, and they get bailed out. So this traditional banking model is now bankrupt, and we all know this. And that traditional banking model is, there's a bank officer over in the corner, usually a man, fortunately more women too, walk into the bank with an application that has been completed because they can read and write. They sit down with the bank officer for 25 minutes, they hand over those papers, the bank officer in that 25 minutes asks a couple questions, the person leaves, and he or she makes 2 phone calls, and they make a loan for $25,000. That's how traditional banking happens in the United States and most of the world. Microcredit is the exact opposite. Nobody sort of goes into a bank with an application and a piece of paper. Often the loan officer goes to the community on a mule, on a horse, on a donkey, on a moped, on a bicycle, sits down with a group of women, maybe 40 of them, spends 2 hours there giving loans to the first 5 people and collecting loans from the other people. For they do that for 40 women in 52 weeks. They do that every week. That's one loan officer going out of the community into the rural area. That's one solidarity or peer group. And that loan officer does 6 more of those for the rest of the day. That takes time and money. I'll tell you what else is happening. if you're a loan officer and you're on a bicycle or a moped and you're going from villages and rural areas with money on you, what happens? You get robbed. You got to build into the system the fact that there's going to be money stolen. Because 84% of the recipients of our loans are women, because women will use the resources better than men. I'm sorry to say that our DNA is the same everywhere. You give us $1 on Friday, we will drink with it, we will smoke with it, we will buy sex with it, we will buy drugs with it. We don't get it all home to the family. A woman is a much more reliable borrower because she uses it for her family and she pays it off better than a man. So we make loans to women, and they use it for the right purposes. They're safer, they're smarter, and it's a way to beat poverty. So we think the loan officers should be women because women are the recipients of the loans. And so we encourage women to take the jobs, but they won't. Why? Because they'll get robbed and beaten up. So you have to build into the system the coverage of just that money getting stolen by the loan officer going community to community. So because it's labor intensive, it's 20%. But I will tell you this, poor people are paying back their loans at 20% because it's the best credit, it is the only credit they can get. They cannot get commercial loans, which might be 10%, because they have nothing to collateralize for it. Or they pay exorbitant fees to a predator. So 20% credit is very affordable credit to a poor person who has no other access to financial services. So 2% from you, the 7 to 9% that we have covers some of the default that we experience. We've only been in court 2 years in 36 years. I mean, 2 times in 36 years. A Methodist minister, I'm glad he wasn't Lutheran tonight, in Argentina borrowed $300,000 for a theological project for community organizing and other things, and walked away with the money. We lost that money. We have very, very little corruption and very, very little problems with people abusing it. But what we do experience is because a lot of these loans are used for agricultural purposes. A lot of the loans to women are for women to buy tomatoes from a farmer in the community, and she finds a way to get those tomatoes into a plaza and sells those tomatoes. That's where her markup is. Or she buys maize or corn from some farmer in the rural area, finds a way to make food and sells food. A lot of this is agriculture. A lot of this is land, and a lot of this is right on the farm and right next to the ground. And what happens if you have a lot of stuff that's based in the agricultural weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, a lot of this stuff gets wiped out because of floods. And that's the loss that we have to build into the system. So we're not a profit maximization organization. We've been given awards for how we use the money resources wisely, as well as making sure that they go to the right people, from Ethabel in Brussels and from the consultative group to assist the poor in Washington, D.C. We believe in, we're a pro-poor organization, not a pro-profit organization. So we keep the costs down. I have to confess, this organization is based in the Netherlands. The Dutch have a deserved reputation for watching where every dollar and euro, and there's an annual report over there that will testify to that. So this is a very lean organization. When I say we have 31 offices around the world, they're like 2 people in those offices. So these are small, truncated, streamlined, lean, and efficient people and organizations that are trying to deliver credit. So you get 2%, we get 7.5%, and the MFIs, and we regulate those MFIs. So what we end up doing is we say between 1.5 and 3% on a monthly basis, which is 18 to even as high as 36% in some countries. If you're in that range, 18 to 36, we will make it possible. Most of what we do is in the 24% range. But that's the spread that we will allow and still fund an MFI if it's making loans at that rate. If you get way beyond that, and believe me, there's some places where it's 75 and 80 and it's still called microfinance, we will not touch an MFI like that. There are 10,000 microcredit banks in the world that are organized by Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1s are very big and profitable with huge client bases. We don't loan there. We loan to grassroots, Tier 3, and ones that are moving off subsidies in Tier 2 It's a whole class organization of MFIs. You have to be careful about where you place it.
Could you, what MFI means, what again?
Microfinance institution. So I hope that helps address some of that, Dan, and you could follow up some more, and maybe there's some other questions that people might have.
Yeah, questions?
Yeah, please.
What is your, well, there's various tiers, what is your maximum of your loan?
What is the maximum amount that we will loan? So we believe that poor people have to be given a chance to get out of poverty. You cannot make small loans for short periods and expect that to really help. So we're serious about seeing loans to poor people make a difference. And we're willing to stay with our partners and with the projects that we loan to for longer periods of time. The maximum amount of a loan that we will make is 5 million euros. Now we loan to an institution. Most of our loans are about 400,000 to 2 million euros or dollars. So we're loaning to a microcredit bank or a cooperative for up to 10 years. So we believe that you have to give that opportunity gestation time for it to develop. In our organization, depending on the size of the loan and where, we can make that decision at the local level. There's another strata that if it's more money and for a different project that's not so clear, it can be made by one of our 6 regional development centers. And then if it's much higher than that, it's made by our staff in the office in the Netherlands. And then there's another layer that's made by our international board of directors. So depending on the size and the conditions of the loan and what it's for, where it is, etc., it can be made in various different places. We try to make a decision fast so that the borrowers can get a quick reply to their application. And what happens is, a borrower, like a microfinance institution or a group of farmers who want to form a cooperative, will come to one of our staff in these 31 countries. They'll have a conversation. That conversation gets worked into a business plan. That business plan gets submitted, and then some are approved. It usually takes, when you walk in the door and have the first conversation with our staff, and that's on the ground in 71 countries, to the business plan, that period can be about 4 months. And we try to make that as fast as possible so that people can get money and get working. So right now, we have programs and proposals that have been approved that are waiting for money so that that loan can be dispersed. Oiko Credit is a very, very popular organization around the world. People learn about us through the internet, through word of mouth. We have staff that go looking for the right partners. So right now we have more inventory in terms of approved loans that are waiting for investments so that we can disperse the money to those projects. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Also down on the micro loan companies, what is the max of their loan?
Oh, those loans will vary depending on first loan, second loan, etc. So this will also depend on the economies and the vitality of those countries and those communities. For us, initial micro loan is between $25 and $500. That's the first range, and it doesn't go higher than $1,000. And once you're at $1,000, you move on into some other place where you can get loans and credits from another organization. You move into like small and medium enterprises, etc. So generally, the first loan is the average loan is $200. So if you look at all that money I talked about in the pipeline to 210 million people, that's an average of about $200 per micro loan. But they can be as low as 25, they can be as high as 500 depending on the first loan, and then for us they can reach about $1,000, and then you move off into some other place where you can get other kinds of credit. We use the money for the people who can't get that credit. Yes?
I take it you don't try to securitize your loans, do you?
We have guarantees from organizations that will allow us to take risks, and we have loan loss reserves within the fund that allow us to cover the exposure, but there's no guarantee, there's no securitization like I think you're talking about.
I'm thinking about, as in the case of the mortgages, where they're twin pools.
Yeah, no. No, I mean, we make the loans to the institutions, and they will sometimes bundle those loans for different borrowers, et cetera, in terms of solidarity groups or peer groups that help make that transaction a more cohesive one. But no, nothing like you're talking about for traditional loan activity. Yes?
It doesn't sound like Oiko Credit makes loans to the impoverished in the United States, and I was wondering why not, and if there are organizations that do.
Very good question.
Can you repeat the question? Repeat the question.
She was asking, it sounds like Oiko Credit does not make loans in the United States, and she'd like to know why not, and if there are other organizations that do. Oiko Credit used to make loans in the United States until 1998. The last couple of loans that we had at that time were to community development banks, such as one in Brooklyn, New York, that served African Americans and Haitians, and a string of loans to Native American communities, North, South Dakota, New Mexico, and Arizona. We stopped making loans in the United States in 1998 for two reasons. One, no matter, I want to be careful how I say this, there is a lot of poverty in the United States. And in fact, there's more and more poverty in the United States. And one poor person is one too many as far as I'm concerned. But the quality or the character of poverty in the United States is not the same kind of poverty as in Uganda and in India and in Bolivia, where poor people live much closer to the edge, in much more hopelessness and desperation. So there's two different kinds of poverty. Neither is good, but the international poverty that we see is qualitatively different than the poverty in the United States. And this is much more painful and much more serious. But it's not the only reason. Even though churches and governments and community groups and civic organizations are doing a lot, they're not doing enough, but they are doing something. There are more possibilities in the United States for support of your poor than internationally. If you look at what international development does compared to domestic development, or what the governments do and what international organizations do, this is a very small percentage going out, and a whole lot that's being focused here, though even that is not enough. So for those reasons, we decided that we will triage and use it where we think it is. On the other hand, there are 6,000 community development financial institutions in the United States. With the Reinvestment Act of 1978, or is it 1982? I'm forgetting what year, the Congressional Reinvestment Act, which forced banks that were redlining and they had to do better community investing. This gave rise to different kinds of banks like Shore Bank in Chicago, CDFIs. If you go to cdfi.org, you will see that there are 6,000 community development financial institutions in the United States which function pretty much like microcredit institutions, although the scale is different. If a microcredit loan initially is $25 to $500 and goes up to $1,000, is what we do in Asia, Africa, Latin America. A small loan from a CDFI in the United States is like $3,000 to $15,000. So it's a different scale, but it existed. So those are the reasons why we don't make loans in the United States like we used to. We have one loan in the United States right now. It's an equity investment in what is called Divine Chocolate. Divine Chocolate in Washington, D.C. buys a lot of cocoa from a cooperative that we fund in Ghana. And that's a cooperative as well. In 2012, I was just at the UN last Monday, 2012 is the International Year of the Cooperative. And we are a cooperative. We are a cooperative that makes loans to cooperative. I sound like a needle that's stuck in a record somewhere. So in order to help the cooperative in Ghana sell more of its chocolate, its cocoa, we support Divine Chocolate in the United Kingdom and Divine Chocolate in the United States to increase the market purchase. So if they're going to sell more chocolate bars here, then that helps them. So if you know of, if you go to stores and they're not selling Divine Chocolate, tell them to buy Divine Chocolate. We also fund 57 fair trade organizations around the world. Of the 900 partners that we have, 57 of them are fair trade in Asia, Africa, Latin America. There's a good chance, you better be careful, there's a good chance that your coffee is fair trade.
It is.
And see, your coffee is fair trade.
Very good chance.
Thank you. I'm very glad about that. There you go. The coffee that you have here. Another way to support fair trade is to invest in Oiko Credit, which allows us to fund fair trade cooperatives around the world, because fair trade cooperatives mean people get paid better, they work in better conditions, there's more environmental regulation of that, and it cuts out the abuse of those workers and reduces the benefit of that middle person. So fair trade is a very important way to go. There's some controversy about fair trade in terms of stamping, and even transfer here in Oakland has made some decisions that make a little difference, so there's a lot going on there. But basically it's still a very pro-justice, so fair trade. So Divine Chocolate is a fair trade cooperative. organization that if you buy more Divine Chocolate, which I hope you will, that will help farmers. That's the only loan that we have right now.
So, just as a follow-up, are there any of these CDFIs that are like ecumenically supported the way that Oiko Credit is, or are you guys pretty unique in that?
Well, in terms of, in this microfinance world, we're known as an MIV. It's a microfinance investment vehicle. That means you invest in a fund, and that fund makes loans to the microcredit organizations. And there are 118 of those. And this is what I was mentioning before. The consultative group to assist the poor vetted 92 of those 118 MIVs, and those are global, and gave Oiko Credit the highest ranking. And so there are other MIVs in the United States that work with religious organizations. We're the only one that was founded by churches. I will point out another one with a lot of respect, but with also a serious difference. It's called Opportunity International. It's based in Chicago, Illinois. It gets a lot of support from religious organizations. You have to invest much higher amounts than with us, but they evangelize with their loans. So when they're making a loan in Asia, Africa, Latin America is pretty Christian, although it's not Protestant. Even in Latin America, when they give you a loan, they give you a Bible. And they get you into sort of a religious group. That means that while you're borrowing the money, you're in a process of being proselytized. We don't think that's a good way to deliver credit to poor people. We are not an evangelizing organization. We might be faith-based because we come out of religious traditions. We're an economic justice, economic development organization. We have a lot of loans in Indonesia, which is the highest population of Muslims in the world. Most of our loans are in India, which is like 1.8% Christian. It doesn't matter what your faith is. That shouldn't matter whether you get the loan or what the terms are to make the borrow. So there are some other organizations that work churches, and some have seen what Oiko Credit has done with churches and have tried to piggyback on that. So now I will do the commercial about Oiko Credit. So, we were known as the Ecumenical Development Cooperative Society, which is still our legally chartered name. There are people who come to me and say, look, you're a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States, and I just went to the IRS inventory and I didn't find you there, you're lying to us. And that's because they're looking for Oiko Credit. When you do that, you have to look for Ecumenical Development Cooperative Society. So Ecumenical Development Cooperative Society, a lot of syllables, and you still have to explain what it means. So the organization did a DBA in 1998, the same year that we discontinued the United States. A DBA is doing business as Oiko Credit. Oiko Credit has fewer syllables, but what the hell does it mean? So it's another pedagogical moment. So it's actually two religious terms. And the first one is oikos, O-I-K-O-S, which is ancient Koine Greek. It means the well-being of the household. It's not the house. It is the relationships within the household. These are extended families 3,000 years ago. 40 or 50 people in the same place. That they divided up obligations and responsibilities. And if you met those obligations and responsibilities, then you were awarded privileges and rights. So if the kids swept the leaves, they could say what they want to do on vacation. And as long as you did some of this, you got to eat. And the idea was if you had that at the lowest level, you had greater possibilities for justice at the higher level. So oikos is the well-being of relationships so that you might have social justice and social harmony. So etymologically, in terms of word derivation, the OI diphthong in English becomes an E. The K moves from that to a C. So it's ECO is the root, and we get the words economics, ecology, and ecumenical from the word oikos. The word credit is Latin, credere, to affirm, to believe. When you do a credo, it's the first person singular. I believe, I affirm. The idea is, if you loan money to somebody, you believe that they will pay you back. So we took the Latin and the Greek and put them together, and now you know what Oiko Credit stands for. Yes.
So if somebody wanted to look up on the internet information about Oiko Credit, can you slowly give the address?
Yes, and there's literature over here that has the address, and I have business cards here too. So there are two addresses. One is oikocredit.org, and one is oikocreditusa.org.
Can you spell Oiko again for that?
I can. Oiko Credit is spelled oikocredit. And if you call the number on my card, you'll hear my 10-year-old boy pick up the phone and say, "This is Oiko Credit," so, and that's worth hearing if I don't mind. Please, Dick.
Are you making any use anymore of the microplace?
Yes, Dick is asking about whether we use an internet portal called Microplace, which is a digital operation owned and operated by eBay in Santa Cruz, something in Santa Cruz, or somewhere in the South Bay here. There are 5 funds at microplace.com, microplace.com, of which Oiko Credit is one. You can do a digital investment with us at Microplace. It's a different kind of investment than what we call the definitive note, which is a paper transaction. So the best way to make this investment is to fill out this application form and make a check payable to Oiko Credit and send it to us, and there are envelopes over there, and we will put you in our system and acknowledge it, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you wanted to do something even lower, like $20, and $20 is the minimum in Microplace, you can go to microplace.com, look for the Oiko Credit microcredit institutions at Microplace. They're usually between 30 and 45 individual banks, microcredit banks there. You're invited to pick a country and pick a bank. It doesn't mean that your money goes directly to that bank, and that's explained, but that's how you initiate the investment. You can put $20 in there, and you can get, like, I think 0.5 or 1% for certain periods, and then you can build up. The maximum that you can do with that transaction, Microplace, is 10%. We have about 7,000 investors in the United States who have invested through Microplace. That's worth, these are usually younger people with fewer resources. We still value that money. So that's worth about $3 million from those 7,000 investors, which is all appreciated. We prefer that you do this because we have more access with you here. If the default in the Microplace system is if you don't say anything, that means we don't know your name and we don't know your address. You have to really find where it says, "I want more information about Oiko Credit," and if you tick that box, then we get your name and your address. So of those 7,000 investors in Microplace, we have the addresses of 900 of them. We'd like to have all of them. So that's why we like you to come through this door, so that we have more opportunity to interact with you. Our experience is that once you invest with us and you learn more about us, you're going to add to your investment and you're going to stay longer. At Microplace, we can't cultivate that investment as well because we don't have access to them. Typical investment in the United States, we have about 9,000 investors in the United States. Typical investor in the United States is a woman, 57 years old, church member, college educated, and has the average $13,000. When we see that person walk in the door, we go ka-ching. That is our bread and butter. So a lot of our investors are women. They invest more because the women are recipients of the investors. Women are more active and present in churches than men. And so we have more women investors, and thank God for that. And that's sort of where they are. Like I say, there's people who have much more than that, but that's sort of the average investor in the United States. Somebody was up here. Yes?
The question, you mentioned the investors can pick the country.
At Microplace, you have to start the process to activate the system by picking a country, but it does not mean that your money goes to that country.
But in the other method, the paper method.
And even this, we ask you what part of the world interests you so that we can keep you informed of what we do in that part of the world, because we're around the world, but your money does not specifically get targeted to that country.
Okay, so there's no following the success of your investment.
That's right. We cannot track your investment dollar for dollar from where you want it to go because the system is too complicated. Like I said before, we've already made some approvals. We're waiting for money to disperse. And it would just take too much labor. And we don't want to spend money that way to be able to do that. Though we recognize the satisfaction that gives the investor. You invest in a fund, and that fund is all over the place. You can also tell us about potential projects. If you've been to Asia, Africa, Latin America, and know of places that could be credit-worthy, if you will, we'd like to know about that. But you can't specify your dollar, your investment to a particular project, not even to a particular country. I wish we could do that. Kiva approached us in 2005 and wanted to partner with us because we have more access to stories than any organization on the planet. There is no organization that is in 71 countries, that has 900 partners, that's making loans to 30 million people. There's not another organization out there like Oiko Credit. So when Kiva got going, it saw Oiko Credit, it saw all of these microfinance institutions, and the possibility of all these photos and all these stories about borrowers. And they came to us, and I spent 7 months with their lawyers. And they wanted to have access to those names and those individuals for their marketing. And they told us, we're going to be able to identify where the investor's money is going to go to that person. And we said, show us that process. And they showed it to us. And we said, no, that is actually not true. You are not able to specify that that investment from a Kiva donor is going to that. They put this on, and that's why we said no to them. We couldn't do it because it was too risky. We knew that they would get in trouble. And 3 years ago, they got in trouble because they got pushed back. People began to realize that the money that they thought they were giving to borrower wherever was going there was not going there. So even there are organizations that realize the market value in being able to tie your dollar to the locus of where it goes, it's really not possible to do in the system. Wish that it were, but too labor intensive to make it realistic.
What is the default risk?
Well, our portfolio at risk right now is a little higher because of the global economy. So our portfolio at risk, which is a loan that has not been paid back after 90 days, is right now at about 5.7. It's usually about 3.4, 3.6, and it's particularly exposed in Andhra Pradesh and India, a little bit in Bulgaria, and a no-pay movement in Nicaragua where we're having some trouble. Our default is less than 1%. It's like 0.6. Because we have eyes and ears and people on the ground who really, even if you haven't paid us back in 90 days, we don't cut you off and do anything. We want that program and that project to succeed. And we can go back into that project and help it get back on track. So our default rate is very, very, very low, negligible. And I really mean this. This information, which is where everything is. You can look, this is the last 5 years, those columns right there. And every dime, nickel, penny, euro, etc. is in here. And you can get this online. You can take my card and I'll send it to you. You can see how Oiko Credit manages risk so well that the satisfaction to investors and the performance on the ground is so sterling. That's why CGAP, as I mentioned before, has given us this award. We make sure that the money goes to poor people. We make sure that the poor people are not abused when they borrow the money. And we make sure that if there are some difficulties and troubles, we're there to help people because we want them to succeed. And the reason why we want them to succeed is because we want them to pay us back. We're not just, this is a business. This is a sustainable business. So it has to be sustainable and it has to be able to work to do it.
All right. One more question, Dick, since we're getting towards the end of time. Dick?
How often does an investor get a statement?
Good question. So let's do it this way. Let's say you go home, you talk in your family, and you decide that on December 1st you're going to invest $10,000 in Oiko Credit. You fill out this application form. It has to be in dollars. You have to have a U.S. address, and you have to have a Social Security according to the law. So you have to make sure that that's complete. You send in $10,000 in a check to us with this completed application form. Immediately we send you an email, if you put the email address, or a letter saying, we have just received your investment. You will get a formal confirmation in 10 to 12 business days. In 10 to 12 business days, we give you an identification number. We give you an investment number. We send you something that says, you just invested $10,000 at 2% for 1 year. This is your written confirmation. So it's not a deed, it's not so much a certificate, it's a written letter that confirms that. You're now in our system. We will send you 2 written mailings a year. Our investors are green-minded, they don't want too much paper. We will send you a mailing in the spring, we will send you a mailing in the fall. We will offer you emails on certain things about what we do that you can even be a part of. You could be invited to this thing tonight because you got some notification. And then, in terms of the investment, if you had $10,000 at 2% for 1 year, 6 weeks before December 1st, and now we're talking about we're talking about 6 weeks before December 1st, 2012. Are you with me? You put it in for 1 year. 6 weeks in the middle of October, before December 1st, we send you a letter that says the anniversary of your investment is about to approach. What do you want to do with the interest? Do you want the $200 added to the principal? Do you want the $200 paid out to you? Do you want to donate the $200 to Oiko Credit? And do you want to roll over the investment for another year, another 3 years? You give us a written instruction, and whatever you say to us is what we do. It has to be in writing, either an email or a letter according to the SEC, and we will follow. So you get 2 mailings, you get 2 confirmations at the beginning of it, and then you get a letter as your investment is about to mature. If you put it in for 3 years, on the anniversary of the first year, we ask you what you want to do with the interest. On the anniversary of the 3rd year, we ask you what you want to do with the interest and the principal. And you can always get more information from us. We're happy to overwhelm you, but that's the amount of contact that we have gauged is when our investors are comfortable. Does that answer your question?
And that was a great question.
Yeah.
Pete, are you going to break the rule? And it's a follow-up.
Well, yeah, I mean, he mentioned that you could donate your interest. What does Oiko Credit do with such a donation?
Yeah, first of all, a donation to Oiko Credit is a tax-deductible donation. We're a 501c3. And if you donate your interest to the organization, it goes into the loan fund. We raise our operating costs separately. In fact, there's a firewall between our investment money and our operating budget. So any donations to Oiko Credit gets put in the revolving loan fund and is used for credit in Asia, Africa, Latin America.
Great question. So you can decide what you want to do with the interest you earned over the course of those 1, 2, or 3 years. As well, Terry, it has been great to have you here. I was delighted that Terry could make this an option. You come to the city, you come to San Francisco enough that we could squeeze in one of these. It's been great to have him. I think just a round of applause for Terry and for